Sergeant and Mrs. Smith, you're going to love this house.
Is that a tub in the kitchen?
There's no field manual for finding the right home. But when you do, USAA Homeowners Insurance can help protect it the right way. Restrictions apply.
Greatness hurts. It's 10,000 hours of hard work, sweat, and setbacks. The aches, the stumbles, the falls. Tylenol provides pain relief for the champion in us all. It's the #1 doctor-recommended brand of pain relief and fever reduction. This summer, when greatness hurts, Tylenol will be there with care to help you keep chasing it. That's Tylenol. That's care without limits. Visit Tylenol.com/greatness-hurts to learn more. Use as directed.
Those freshman players, those developmental players are as important as those Friday night players. Getting coaches to buy into that as well. Getting rid of the ego of, well, I'm the varsity D-line coach or I'm the varsity defensive coordinator. Our defensive coordinator coaches the freshmen just as hard as he coaches the varsity.
On this week's Champion Series presented by Signature Championship Rings, we talk about developing our younger players throughout the season, especially as we approach the middle of the season. Joining me on this episode is Bob Gecewich. He's the head coach at Perry High School, who won their first state championship in 2023. Coach Gecewich has been at a number of successful programs around Ohio, and today he's going to share insight on how they develop their younger players and make sure that the freshmen are getting the most coaching that they can, and how they're able to create success for their scout team and reward players for their efforts on Friday nights. Be sure to stay tuned for our Winning Edge takeaways following the episode.
When it comes to towing, seeing is believing. That's why Chevy Truck's advanced camera technology offers up to 8 available cameras for 14 unique views, so you can focus on the view that really matters. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Learn more about Chevy Trucks at Chevy.com. Safety or driver assistance features are no substitute for the driver's responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner. Read the vehicle owner's manual for important feature limitations and information.
On today's episode of our Champions Series, in-season episodes, we're going to talk about developing our younger players. And as we hit the midseason, those opportunities come about when we think about how can we maybe take the load off of some of our experienced players who have now kind of settled into their positions and make sure that we're continuing to develop our program through the season. And joining me to discuss that is the head coach of Ohio State champion Perry High School, Bob Gecewich. Coach, great to have you here on the podcast.
Coach, I really appreciate you having me. Looking forward to talking about in-season development.
So when we look at this easy, after we've gone through the early weeks of the season, we want to get a great start. We're focused on just how do we get our best 11 out on the field. But as things start to settle in towards the middle of the season, we need to look at the opportunity to develop our younger guys too. For them, a challenging time to be the next man up or to be a little bit down the line. If you're not maybe getting the reps you want on a Friday night, are you losing that motivation? Obviously, you want to keep those kids motivated, but more importantly, it's about development. So we'd love to hear your philosophy on how you develop players in season.
Yeah, so I think you hit it on the head. One of the things that we sometimes lose sight of is that football is not fun Monday through Thursday. It can be very monotonous, very difficult. And it's especially not fun if you're the scout player on both sides of the ball. You're not seeing that playing time on Friday night. And I think of not just your freshman and sophomore players, but your junior players as well, who in their mind, right, when you start off, I should be starting as a junior, I should be playing. So how do we keep those guys involved? And I think the biggest thing for us is how we actually coach our scout teams. We coach our scout teams like it's our team. And what I mean by that is, we'll practice the other team's scheme, but we put as much of it in our verbiage as possible. We'll even manipulate it a little bit so that sometimes we don't get a 100% accurate look, especially defensively, so that our guys can run our defensive scheme with some confidence or as close to it. The other side that helps is our coaches coach everyone 9 through 12. I've been fortunate to coach in the smallest division when I was an assistant at Marion Local, and the largest division when I was the head coach at Dublin Jerome. And we did the same thing. All of our varsity coaches coached freshmen. All of our varsity coaches coached JV. So those guys are getting what we consider our best coaching. We're not just sending a group of kids off with just 2 guys for an entire 2-hour practice or whatever it may be. So they're getting coaching points as they go through. It's not just hey, you're a tackling dummy, you're a blocking dummy. The other side to it is we love those guys up left and right. You make how difficult it is running a scout offense. So if you're getting 2 yards on a run, we act as if they just ripped off a 20-yarder because it's difficult. It's difficult when you have a sophomore lineman or someone like that going against a senior defensive lineman. So we love those guys up, but I think one of the biggest things is when we coach them, we are actually coaching them. They're not just the letter on the scout card. We put it in our terminology or we relate it to something that we do in our games. The second piece is every single one of our kids plays in freshman and every single one plays in JV. If you've practiced all week and you know what you're doing, you're going to get playing time. Doesn't necessarily mean equal playing time, but you are going to get playing time. That's a lot of work to put in for 5 plays, for 3 plays, whatever it may be. And I've seen other teams that keep the same guys in and there are guys on their bench that never get in. They're going to lose those guys. And our big thing with our freshmen and JV is to develop those guys and keep them out because we never know how their bodies are going to change, how their physicality is going to change, and when they're going to blossom.
Yeah, the freshman championships, the JV championships, those are all great as long as they're translating to a varsity championship as well. Otherwise, what did you do during those years to develop the guys? And like you said, I mean, man, these are high school kids. This is a little bit different than college guys where they're getting towards their peak of where they're going to be. They're still going to develop, but like you just never know what kid's going to have that growth spurt. Like what kid is all of a sudden going to come into his own as an athlete. Those things still are developing in high school. Would love to hear a little bit about the logistics of it and also get into scout team a little bit here too. But first, you mentioned your varsity coaches coaching these guys instead of, like you said, sending them off with 2, making sure that these guys are not just getting the quality of coaching, but it's important that positions are coached. When you have 2 guys, you can't coach all positions, right? You usually end up either running half line or we take all the skill, some of the line. Those things don't translate to the details of coaching. So logistically, how do you guys make this work over the course of the week too, with freshman and JV games being played on different days than your Friday night lights?
Yeah, so there are a couple of questions there that are really good. So one, we 2-platoon our staff. We have strictly defense and strictly offense. And I know everyone messes around every once in a while. Hey, our D-line coach is going to be our assistant O-line coach. And I don't know how well that actually ever works out when you get into smaller numbers and you're not necessarily 2-platoon. So there are 2 things we do. One, we 2-platoon our staff. And then 2, in season, ideally, we'd love to just have a freshman group and a sophomore through senior group. So our numbers will have mid-60s. In 2 years, we're looking to be upper 70s, low 80s. We've got a bigger class coming in. How many of those kids stick it out? But one of the big things that we do is sales job to some of our sophomores, our developing guys. Hey, you can stay with this sophomore to senior group and you're only going to get scout team reps, or you can go with this younger group and you're getting primary reps. You're getting a ton of reps. And it's just all about development. They're still going to play in that JV game, but now in practice, instead of running slant 3 times, you're running it 15 times. Those sorts of things. And we found that the majority of our kids are very open to it. I think we forget that football is voluntary and most of these kids want to be there. So if you give them an opportunity to play, that they're going to look for that opportunity to play. So 2-platooning the staff has been huge for us, just as a top-down belief that those freshman players, those developmental players are as important as those Friday night players, getting coaches to buy into that as well, getting rid of the ego of, well, I'm the varsity D-line coach or I'm the varsity defensive coordinator. Our defensive coordinator coaches the freshmen just as hard as he coaches the varsity. I run the offense. It's about the same way. And on game days, I take a step back on freshman and JV game days. And I actually sometimes have to remove myself from the sidelines because I want to step on toes of our running backs coach or our wideouts coach who's calling the plays. But I want those guys to develop and learn how to do it too. So I think splitting the staff has been tantamount to us being able to do that. And those guys have all bought into, hey, this freshman D tackle is just as important as our Friday night D tackle. And then our players being selfless, I call it selfishly selfless, right? They're going down there so that they can get more reps, but they also understand that that's what we need to be able to run that second group of practice. So they're doing it for the team and for themselves at the same time. That's been major for those guys to kind of put their ego aside and not worry about which group they're practicing with, just that they're practicing and getting better.
The scout team aspect of it, too, is something I wanted to address because you mentioned, hey, a 2-yard gain, you're going to celebrate it. And it made me think of something we implemented when I was at BW. And it really stemmed out of a frustration of not getting what we wanted out of our scout team. And this is just true at every level. If these guys were where they needed to be, they wouldn't be with the scout team. I even go back to when Ohio State won a national championship under Jim Tressel. Remember hearing him in one of the post-championship conferences talking about his scout team and how hard they worked. And his quote was something like, they ran as fast as their 4.7 legs could carry them, right? Like that's at the highest level. And he's got guys out there running a 4.7 on scout team, definitely not the speed you're seeing on game day. So we really looked at, and I'll share the link to this one in the show notes, but we really looked at, okay, what are the standards for practice and kind of taking the focus off of the performance of the scout team. We're going to coach them up. We're always going to try to get better, but we're going to get what we get. We can't get frustrated with those guys because now that's just a negative experience on them. So put the focus on those, the first team, second team, whoever you're running against them, both their effort and their execution, and thinking about things like we had a rule that, hey, every play scores, right? Finish to the goal line and you keep working across the goal line. That would mean our guys, we taught them to be smart. Like, hey, if you just saw that running back run 40 yards, go jump in, give him the next play off, right? Same with receivers, etc. Then we just came up with like standards for example, on pass plays, nobody being within 4 yards of the quarterback ever, right? That put the focus on our offensive line, making sure like, hey, you're not getting lazy, like move your feet, because if this guy gets tight, even though we didn't sack him, we're going to count that against you, right? Developing clear running lanes that we were able to, with our offensive line, get in the exact positions we need. So it was still about the timing. It was still about the correct hand placement and body position, but the perfect technique to allow those things to happen and really create the perfect look. Like when those things are off, we're saying, hey, if this scout team player could kind of distort how this play is supposed to look, we're going to have some problems on Friday night. So I got it from Pete Peterson, who was longtime college coach, and he shared the idea, and it was like, yes, this is exactly what we need. So I'll share that in the show notes, but you mentioned it too, right? Celebrating when those guys do well. So we'd just love to hear a little bit about how you guys coach up those players when they are on scout team.
This episode is brought to you by Ring cameras and doorbells. A lot happens while you're away from home. That's why Ring makes it easy to check in from anywhere. Whether you're saying hi to an unexpected guest, making sure those packages are safe, or keeping your pets company while you're out grabbing groceries. It's all a few taps away, right from your phone. Be there with Ring. Explore cameras, doorbells, alarm kits, and more right now at Ring.com.
At BlueNile.com, you can find endless ways to make your moments sparkle. From classic and timeless jewelry gifts to creating the custom engagement ring of her dreams, all at prices you won't find at a traditional jeweler. And right now, you can save up to 40% on fine jewelry and 25% on engagement ring settings during the Blue Nile Anniversary Sale, going on now. Go to BlueNile.com to shop the Blue Nile Anniversary Sale and save up to 40%. That's BlueNile.com.
Yeah, so I like some of those ideas. You talked about first and second team. Well, effort's non-negotiable in our program, and that's across the board because that's the one thing that you can't control. And I think that's something that maybe you can fake it, but for the most part, we can tell if you're going to your level. And I think that's really important for our coaches to understand is their level. Now, we get a little frustrated with execution when it's something in our base. If it's something in our base, like counter tray is counter tray is counter tray. Our O-line should be able to run that in their sleep because it's one of the core runs that we always have. So if another team's running it, we expect you to be able to do it. Now, if we're putting in Sally or Buck Sweep or something like that week, okay, it's going to look a little wonky. Now, is there something that we have where the technique can be similar? One of the things that we do is we cheat like crazy on scout teams. So what I mean by that is our D-line should be better. When we're bringing pressure, our linebackers should be better. If it is a pass play, I'm letting our D-line know it's a pass play. I'm like, hey, take 3 steps, do your stunt, and then let's stop there. Our D-line has other opportunities where it's best on best, where they can work their pass rush moves, where it's a better offensive line, where they can go full go. But we want our linebackers and our DBs to get those looks, right? I don't know how many times you've seen where you just get a freshman or a sophomore guard launched into the quarterback's lap or the running back's lap, and the play never has a chance to develop. So we talk to them about some of those things, and that's being able to work in cooperation with each other. So with our scout team, the expectation is effort. Outside of that, the expectation is you're still trying to get better. I don't care who's lined up across from you. You're still trying to get better. So the guy saying, hey, our 4.7s ran as hard as our 4.7s can run, same exact thing. Now our guys ain't 4.7 on the scout team, but it's the same exact thing. It's comparable. We expect you to go as hard as you possibly can. And our coaches do hold kids accountable to that. We celebrate the kid that never comes out in the scout team. I'm trying to think. There are weeks, say we're playing an option team, I'll personally take the running back, the quarterback, and whoever else is involved. And when our defense is doing film, I'll go out and I'll teach them as best I can in short notice the mesh of midline, the mesh of triple option, what those steps actually look like on outside veer versus inside veer, so that we have that group that can give a good look. But we played a team, Garrettsville Garfield. The first people we talked about in the newspaper were our scout offense, because it was such a unique offense to get ready for, and called those guys out by name. So I love the concept of setting those goals. And sometimes those goals are realistic and sometimes they're not. The other thing that we do to tier our scout team is, let's say we're playing a team like Kirtland. That's a unique offense, something we don't normally see. We'll have 2 separate offensive scout teams, and we'll have the one that can compete with the varsity guys as best they can, right? They're hopefully not going to beat our varsity guys, but they can compete against them. They run the live play. Then we have a team that just can't. And it's probably because they're freshmen, or, this from your time in high school. Maybe you have to grab a tight end and say, hey, I need you to play guard today because we just don't have the guys. Put those guys in there. They get lined up. They run through the motion. They snap the ball, and our defense just steps to where they're going, take their first couple of read steps, and they go, but no plays actually run. It's a mental rep for our defense. You're keeping more kids involved, but you're also not putting those kids in a position where they're just going to get dominated. They're just going to get discouraged and lose. So I think that that's been extremely, extremely helpful for us, and it increases the buy-in because they are serving a real purpose at practice.
Yeah, I really agree with you 100% on everything you said, especially allowing them to cheat the play, I think is necessary, definitely on pass plays, so those guys can get off the ball with as much speed as they can. But thinking back to coaching high school ball, we put in the stretch play, the outside zone play, and realized really quick that our practices were going to be worthless if we didn't let those guys know that I need you to turn and run to the sideline on the snap of the ball and not get reached when we're running this play. Like, we would literally tell them, hey, you are running this way. We're running stretch this way. Don't get reached. And it forced our guys, because they're playing the play, forced our guys to be really good at moving their feet and their technique. But if we didn't do that, we literally would just reach them now, and every play would look incredibly clean. We wouldn't have developed the vision and the way to see the running lanes and plays develop and the patience if we didn't treat it that way. It was a recommendation I just made to one of the programs here in Northeast Ohio who I consulted with this past year and helping them kind of revamp their offenses. Like, hey, when you run this, you need to tell your scout team, you're running to the right or you're running to the left or running stretch, don't get reached. Like, let them know the play, because it won't develop.
Coach, I'll point out to the defense exactly where the play's going sometimes. We know huddle in practice. We huddle in games for the most part, but we're not using signals. I'm literally just calling out the play, and every one of those guys has repped offense before. So if they're smart, which They're high school kids, so they blank out half the time. They can cheat the play a little bit, but you're absolutely right. You're not going to get a realistic look from a 145-pound D end that you're reaching immediately, because in the real game, you're not going to reach them immediately, especially when they've scouted that you're a heavy wide zone team. It's just not going to happen. So you have to manufacture those looks, which I think is really good. This is kind of an aside, and it's something that I just thought about. So talking about rewarding those scout team players, if we see someone that shines on scout team, we give them a shot on Friday night. They're playing hard over there, and they're making plays against your varsity. If your varsity defense is pretty good, then that stands to reason maybe that kid can make some plays on Friday nights just because he's not in the initial mix. So we try to rotate that kid in or give that kid an opportunity. And that's actually, too, what we consider our trial ground for our special teams units. Hey, this kid runs really well, gives max effort, does these sorts of things. Let's try him on kickoff. Let's try him on punt coverage. Let's do those sorts of things. And it serves two purposes. One, it shows that there is a reward for going hard on scout team. And then two, it gets some guys fresher legs. It gets some guys off the field. So, sorry, I know that was completely an aside, but I just thought about that. Like, how do you get buy-in on your scout team?
Yeah, definitely.
If there's a kid that you're praising, does he have an opportunity to shine somewhere else?
Yeah, obviously a good way of keeping that motivation and keeping those kids working hard for you, that they know, hey, there's potentially a reward for this, that, you know, this will pay off for me. You were talking about the option team you faced in the playoffs, and that is always such a hard thing to face if you are not used to it. And when I was at BW, was Capital for a few years, was running triple option, traditional triple option offense, and you saw our defensive coaches like losing sleep anytime we would do that. But they did some really interesting things to simulate that, just like you did. They went and they worked with those guys, scout team guys, so they could do it. But then they also implemented 2 periods, which I thought was really smart. They did an all ball period and they did a no ball period, meaning that all 4 of the running backs, basically, well, at least the 3 in the option, the quarterback, the dive back, the pitch back, every single one of them carried a ball. And then they did another one where there was no ball, right? And the idea was to make sure everybody was assignment focused rather than ball focused, right? So that really helped. And just a tidbit I could throw out there is it was very productive for our defense. And I thought those were some really good ideas. Yeah, no, those are great ideas, because that's, maybe in the early 80s, everyone saw it week in and week out. You just don't see it anymore. So when you do, it's a heart attack, man. Midline, I lose sleep over midline. So, and I don't even coach defense. Right. I lose sleep over it. Right. So. Well, Coach, I appreciate you taking the time to share these ideas with us. Very useful here as we're rolling through the season and what we can do to continue to develop our players. A lot of great ideas shared here. And best of luck to you and the Pirates the rest of the way. All right, man. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Coach. Here are winning edge takeaways and ideas for implementation. 1, find ways to get your younger players more coaching. Coach Gecewich talked about how they divide their staff into 2 platoons and they make sure that their freshmen and their JVs are coached to the maximum levels, just like their varsity players are. There's a number of ways you can do this, but it's important that those younger guys are getting as much coaching as they can. 2, find ways to create success for your scout team. Whether that's the standards that really take the pressure off of them and put the focus on the execution and effort of your first and second teams, or even allowing them to cheat on plays so that they're giving more of a look that's going to be the speed and execution of a Friday night. There's some creative ways to do that. I mentioned our standards for practice, and I'll share that link to the episode in the show notes. And finally, number 3, reward with playing time. Those guys who are working on scout team, find ways to get them on special teams or into the rotation of playing within a game. It doesn't necessarily need to be a ton of reps there, but that kid who's rewarded with even a few plays on a Friday night, that's going to motivate him to keep going hard for you Monday through Thursday and develop into a player for the future. If you are enjoying the podcast, please go to your favorite app and rate and review. It helps other coaches find the podcast and helps our game. Be sure to check out our sponsors. They're listed in the show notes and in the 10% Toolkit. These are companies that we believe in, and they also provide some great benefits to you as the listener. So check those out in the 10% Toolkit. The list is in the show notes. Be sure to check out our new episode each week, the Coach and Coordinator National Coach of the Week, presented by Modern Football Technology. That'll be out every single Wednesday, and we'll be highlighting some of the great high school coaches from around the country. Follow all we're doing at coachandcoordinator.com and follow us on X at Coach K. Grabowski.